So I think I'm definitely about to cancel for this argumentation.
Absolutely.
All right. All right, everybody, welcome back. My name is Antonio Brown.
Irvin Bryant.
This is the Economy Book Podcast.
Relatively Conscious.
Shout out to our DJ for making a beat.
At DW Made That on social media.
All right, so this is the hot spot.
Gentlemen and lady, this is the hot spot. You will enter it at your own risk.
For the past, since George Floyd's death, right, there have been riots, and there's been conversation on academia, Black Twitter, left Twitter, about the constructiveness of said riots, right? Are they working? Should we condemn them, or are we just feeding into the oppressor, right? So that's why we came up with this hotspot today. Of course, as the debate is, these are just giving two sides of an argument. The resolution.
Yeah, so what we'll be arguing is a resolution, which reads thusly: the summer 2020 race riots have a negative impact on progress. I will be negating this resolution. Sorry for the double negative. So I believe that riots are good for progress.
I would be affirming that they are not good for progress, right? All right, so as an affirmative, two observations off top. One, it is not, the majority of the rioters are probably not Black people, right? From what we've seen on Twitter videos, right? I'm not going to make a definitive statement about that.
Right. No one's taking the census at the riot.
Yeah, so we don't know. But from what I've seen a lot of people with black and melatonin throwing a lot of Molotov cocktails. Observation 2. All right, to Black left Twitter, right? I understand that to even ask the question is to feed into the oppressor, to feed into his narrative, that the oppressed must make amends to the oppressor or must act in a certain way for the oppressor to even listen to them, right? I understand the book. I was a political science too. I read it, right? But as a hardened combat sergeant would tell a brand new lieutenant on the ground, throw that book out the window once the bullets actually start flying. Because once we get to the actual meat of progress, the book theory doesn't work. And that's why the feminist's first argument here is that they aren't reaching our stated goal. So the stated goal of Black Lives Matter is to have real progressive change that is concrete, right? George Floyd's father said he wanted to see legislation, right? He wanted to see a change that spans generations, right? We think about previous movements. We think of Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment. Things are concrete that can't be changed, right? Now, there are times when the Supreme Court can come and try to take it away. But the Voting Rights Act is still law, right? So you still can't have a grandfather clause on Waller County, right? Because of the Voting Rights Act. This is important because reaching the goal of legislation in the world of politics means that there needs to be a consensus on the issue, right? Most people have to agree on it before Congress even steps to it, right? So the problem is Black Lives Matter support went up 10 points, 12 points during the George Floyd's peaceful protests, right? But as the riots became more frequent, as it became the more focal point, people started focusing on the peaceful protests, Black Lives Matter support went back to its levels previously before George Floyd's death, right? So that means the gains we got were completely wiped away in popularity because of riots, right? Actually, the polling data on the fact that people believe that the protests are mainly violent has gone through the roof since the protests have been shown to be more violent, right? This is important because if you don't have a consensus in Congress, you can't get legislation passed. Unless we vote in a Democratic president, voted a 2/3 of the Senate majority to be Democrat, which is not even possible this session. The House stays completely Democrat, and we have Democrat governors, mayors, legislators across the entire country. Legislation will not get passed because there is not the universal support. My second point, right? In a white country, movement is only made when there's unambiguous violence committed by the state to defend its people, right? The reason why that is important is because I'm gonna get her name correct. Miss Erica Chenoweth from Harvard University did a study about the impact of the civil rights movement, right? And her main takeaway from it was that the violence committed by the state against black people who were seen as being peaceful was so heart-wrenching to watch. Seeing dolls being turned on teenagers, seeing little Ruby go to school and have people call her a nigger to her face. These things are so heart-wrenching to watch that the white consciousness must begin to think clearly about the issues at hand, right? This is why Black Lives Matter got 12 points of support at the beginning of the movement, because there were peaceful protests, people really started to think about it. But as it became violent, it went away. 1968 riots was the reason why we have President Nixon, because he used the law in order case. Donald Trump is using the same thing now, right? On the bottom line argument, the riots aren't working, are going to help us achieve our goal. Being willy-nilly about property damage, saying that property damage shouldn't really matter, clowning people for caring about property damage. It comes off as condescending. It comes off as not caring what matters to people. And the main thing about legislation is that you must meet in the middle. There must be some work to come to a consensus. If you tell Republicans to their face, the fact you care about property is just stupid, then they're never going to come to the table in the first place. So Mr. Connors is going to come to the table now, and if you say that, he's even more reason not to come to the table, right? The main thing that we need to have, if our main goal is legislation, our main goal is to have concrete change, we must get legislation done. If that is the goal, the riots are not working because they make it hard to get that stated goal.
All right, and now it's my turn. Time to negate. So I'll keep it simple. I'm just going to be addressing what you've already said and kind of give a little wrap up at the end. So in the same order as we heard them. First off, observation 1, it's a lot of white people, and this is a fact.
Yes.
But the fact remains that, there is an impact on progress. Regardless of if it's white people or black people, there's an impact on progress when there is a riot, right? And then observation 2 is that you say that you got to throw the book away. False, lies, don't believe it. Why? Is because the best books when it comes to revolution, leftist ideals, black thought, black consciousness are not written by some kind of ivory tower, far removed egghead. Those are written by Huey P. Newton, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, just to name the most popular, right? But these are individuals who are not only directly victims of persecution, which basically all black writers are, but those three are champions, like front line of the black struggle for progress. So you need not throw the book away in the same way that you would throw the book away, like your social studies book that you got in high school, because that piece of trash is worthless. Mm-hmm. It's full of lies, people far removed from the actual facts who are trying to push an agenda on you, as opposed to those who are giving advice as they know their time on this earth is limited, and it was, right? So these are guidebooks, straight up, stick to the books, stick to what you know. The oppressor is oppressing, and you got to get them off your back one way or another. His first point of contention, the first argument, is that it's not reaching its stated goal. BLM's stated goal doesn't exist. And let's keep it a stack. Alicia Garza started Black Lives Matter with a Facebook post and open letters, rather poetic, touching, and she just sparked it off with just a simple turn of phrase. We identified with that, and we ran with it. There was more tweets. Black Twitter did what it does. And it just became a movement. But there is no captain. Alicia Garza intended that on purpose. Whether or not that was a good idea on her part, not the issue that we're discussing now. It's just that Black Lives Matter is not like SNCC. It's not like the Nation of Islam. It's not like the Black Panthers. All these organizations, the Black Star Line, have a singular captain that doesn't exist. There's no mission statement. The only thing is, we believe, it is a sentiment, we believe that Black Lives Matter. So when we do things in the name thereof, we want there to be a protection of black life. Whatever that may look like, it's different all across the country. Laws vary greatly, cultures vary greatly, because New York and California, Washington State are responding drastically differently than a South Carolina, than a Texas. So we reject the premise off it that is the goal. And so if it's not achieving that goal, well, it wasn't going to. That's not the point. The point is to express that we are no longer accepting the wanton loss, wanton taking of black life. And when people in general across the globe fail to accept any particular way of life, any particular oppression, that is when the oppression ceases to happen. And when black people are, by and large, we are the servant class, referred to like the hit book caste, right? Or really any like Marxist critique, racial theory. We're the servant class. When we refuse to serve, and when we start destroying those things which we have built for America, then our grievances must be heard. And let's go to the bottom line argument. Yeah, I'm going to tie a few things together. So you talked about the Civil Rights Act and how the peaceful protest being abused by police is what really pushed things forward. Then you also mentioned that basically we've got to compromise, look forward to the legislative tip, and say, okay, if we're going to legislate, we got to be respectability politics, Martin Luther King, and we got to look a certain way, act a certain way, and meet them in the middle so that we can get things done for progress. And that all makes perfect sense if we take them in a bubble. But in the contemporary political context, we know that the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act have largely been gutted. The teeth have been taken away. So we have rampant voter suppression as we do in the status quo. Whether it's black people, immigrants, especially those from Mexico and Central South America, rights are being trampled upon when it comes to voting. Obviously, most recently, when it comes to those who would rather vote from afar, vote from mail-in voting. The president actively opposes them, entirely ignoring the Voting Rights Act. Civil Rights Act, absolutely ignored by the Trump administration. So, though legislation is key, it affects our lives, right? Cops get to do what they get to do because it's, there's policy. There are laws that allow them to do these things. The laws that we've set up don't protect us at our best. King and the Civil Rights era of the 60s, we're constantly referencing because it was a hit. We did our thing. But even at our best, trying to be respectable, trying to be reasonable, trying to meet people in the middle, it ultimately is a failure because we are trying to meet the oppressor in the middle, and his MO is to oppress. And so, thank you for giving me an inch. I'll take that a mile and keep doing what I want to do. So, rioting, in the words of King, is the language of the unheard. I wouldn't give it a political goal. I wouldn't give it anything beyond Black Lives Matter as a statement. And if you don't make them matter, I'm going to keep tearing stuff up.
Okay, so I'm going to respond back and then get to how I personally feel.
Yeah.
Right? So responding back on the affirmatives beliefs, right? Any movement that doesn't have a stated goal is just nebulous, and its success cannot be measured. And so in a world where there is no parameters, I don't want to do a definition debate here, but there's no parameters, there's no definingness to it, right? Yeah. Then it can be anything, right? So the reason why we gave it the definition of the goal of legislation is because it is a line that can be reached, right? So there's people have asked their city councils to issue legislation to the whole act of actually defunding the police. Going through that is a legislative process. The whole process of prosecuting police officers requires to get rid of qualified immunity. That is a legislative process, right? So the things that we want to happen all must go through the legislative process. And in a system that is a democracy, the good part of that is that we can vote and affect it. The bad part of that is that there must be consensus, right? We just have to come to the table with these people. It is a reality which I wish we didn't have to face, but it's one that is true. And we must come to the table to get legislative done, right? The police unions must be addressed. So to be an example, in HPD in the city of Houston, before you can change the police budget, the police union must be talked to. For defund the police that happen, to abolish the police that happen, anything that happen, the police union must be at the table. They've written that into law. So therefore, we can burn Houston to the ground. But if we want to have to actually take the funding away from them, then they must claim, they will be at the table with us. We cannot change that, right? And real quick with the books, right? When I said throughout the book, I meant mainly that many times the book can keep making us rigid, right? And in Hong Kong, their main thing is be like water. And one of the reasons why I talked about battle-hardened soldiers, because the main thing that they say about the U.S. Army is that we throw away the book when the bullets start flying because it makes us nebulous, right? So if the book says, you don't go to the table with the oppressor because he's going to continue to oppress, but the reality of the situation says you must go to the table, then you need to be like water and change your movement, right? But finally to my actual feeling on the matter, right?
Yeah.
I understand the riots, right? I understand the knee-jerk reaction, right? And I know people's main response is that, these people aren't trained. They're not, they didn't go to school. They don't do political theory, right? Their main goal is stop killing me, right? But I think to say that is do a disservice to the people on the ground. The people who I know who are at the wit's end, who are ready to go into the streets, they are smart people. And even in civil rights era, for every king, there was a Sister Robinson making arrangements for the boycott.
Yes.
There were people on the ground doing that. They didn't have a degree. They didn't go to Howard. They didn't have a doctoral degree. But they understood that in the day, for me to get from point A to point B, I need to do these things, right? So I understand the frustration and the need to act, right? And I say, my thing was that at the beginning of the riots, do your thing. But we're not in August. We've lost all public support that we had for the movement. And that to me is really damning, because in working in DC, and you and I both know this, that means that Pelosi won't ever move. Why should she move if there is no support for this? Because if you're losing Republicans, you've lost all the Republicans, and you're losing independents, what do you lose next? Democrats. And you lose the centrist Democrats, and then you had a problem where you're a fringe idea.
Yeah, I mean, on the personal tip, it's just a lot of truth on all of it.
Yeah.
But I mean, we just want to get Black lives saved at the end of the day, right? Like, let's end this practice. And practices of oppression, like police violence, can end. Whether that's abolition of the police in general, abolition of prisons, you can go all the way there if you want to, and I'm likely to go there with you. But all of that, like, America has fundamentally changed when it comes to the way they relate to Black people. Are we still an underclass? Absolutely, but we are not slaves. I have rights that are respected 90% of the time.
I can go to Denny's.
Yeah, so life has gotten better. And I believe, to quote Obama, we got to reject the cynicism that's really popular in the internet age, because you're just inundated with, you just know too much. Mm-hmm. And, you got to be relatively conscious and to put you in a rage almost all the time. Then Twitter got you in a rage 100%.
Yeah. And
so the rage is balling out. And so I empathize. But we better than that. We're a loving, peaceful people. We're good at building each other up and getting together and making something happen. So I must admit that there is value in the chilling out on the riot end and saying, okay, y'all see the pain. Y'all done heard our, we done made the noise. So let's move forward amicably, and we ain't got to do 2020 again.
All right, my name is Antonio Brown.
Irvin Bryant.
This is Road to Be Conscious.
Do it to him,